every time you reach out and touch your readers, for us, we learn something new. So yeah, that's been the evolution. After that, growth has been exponential. It took us a while. We were very slow, but we finally found the people who truly appreciate what we are doing.
Hello and welcome to Your Heart's Content,
a YouTube show where we're going to look at the aspects of content that really matter, the thought processes, the systems,
and the inspiration.
I'm your host, Deepak Gopalakrishnan, aka Chuck,
And I'm Utsav.
In this show, we're going to be speaking to some people who think deeply about the space of content.
Creators, musicians,
Folks in the business of content, all in a bid to try and understand this space of content a little better.
and how you could benefit from it.
In this episode, we are going to be speaking to Meeta Malhotra. Meeta is a design and brand consultant and strategist. She used to work at Ray+Keshavan, one of India's most respected design consultancies, where she used to be a partner, and post that did several things, started many things, and today runs The Hard Copy, an online publication in the intersection of design, branding, and marketing.
Honestly, it was a very different animal at that point.
Now, I've written for The Hard Copy several articles, several case studies, and I've worked closely with Meeta for the last 5 years. And over that time, have had a deep appreciation for her understanding of branding and just generally her outlook on content and, dare I say, life. Genuinely couldn't think of a better person to chat about the meta observations of content across formats, across geographies, and even across eras.
A large portion of the population will start mass producing things, right? From the Industrial Revolution onwards.
You will see this come out in the show, where she even starts by questioning what content really is. She is at Meeta Malhotra on X and Meeta_Malhotra on Instagram. But really, she would much rather you check out thehardcopy.co. All right, then, on to an insight-filled conversation with Meeta Malhotra. Here we go. Meeta, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you, Deepak and Utsav. Very happy to be here.
Yeah, we have a lot to talk about. Let's start with something that you said before we got started. It's an interesting statement, and you said that you don't consider movies and books content, and that's kind of interesting. So one of the questions that I did want to ask you is, what do you consider content to be? Because the challenge with asking a question like that is you can either get very micro, saying that this podcast episode or this Instagram reel, or you have to zoom out to a level where you're saying something very philosophical, like, oh, it's something that moves humans or brings out emotions. So as somebody who has been through this space, started a project of your own, and has of course consumed a wide variety of content and comments on it, I think a very meta way to start might be to just see what your opinion, what is content?
So, I had to sort this out for myself, because when the word content started appearing in the branding world, I thought it was just so cringeworthy. I mean, I resisted for a long time. And then I had to settle in my head what is content and what is not. And so I've arrived at my own definition of what is content. And I think anything that is produced as a means to an end, and often the end is commercial, is content. And anything that is produced, which is the end itself, is not content.
Fair enough.
So to me, a book is not content. A great film is not content, because they are produced just so you can appreciate them and appreciate the maker's point of view. They're not trying to do anything more than that. Now, everything that's produced, say, around a film, which is to promote it and make it reach a wider audience, that's content.
That's fair. So how, would you have I also understand, I realize that this term content is something that's come up kind of in the digital age. So would you have kind of like a term to classify all the outcomes? Like, what do you call books, films and all that together? Or do we just treat them as art? Fair enough. I think that's a fair point in that case. And
actually, just one thing then, because I get the point of being a means to an end, but sometimes content starts off as content for content's sake or content for art's sake. And eventually a person realizes, oh, I could monetize this and I could start changing the kind of stuff I'm doing, and then eventually monetizes it.
But monetization is not the only end, right? It's one of many ends. So even if you may have thousands of content creators who are unable to monetize, but they are producing because they wanted to reach a wider audience. They want to create a certain brand persona for themselves. There is still an end in sight, which may not be money to start with because maybe they're too small or maybe they haven't got that reach. But I mean, they're doing it for a specific business career objective versus just, doing it for the pure joy and being driven to produce something wonderful.
Yeah, that's fair. If we were to, we don't have a name for this now, so let's just cluster them as content plus art together. I think that would cover I think we can settle that could be a very clunky but a comprehensive way of categorizing everything. What makes for good content plus art from the days of Sholay, and maybe even like way before hieroglyphics, all the way up to say Instagram Reels today and NFTs or whatever it is today?
So again, I don't think that the two can be classified because the big difference is that art is so multi-layered and
Fair.
textured and nuanced, and it's really hard. But content is certainly far more, sort of homogeneous. And yeah, I think that's the right word for it, because you set out to create content with very specific objectives. You want reach. You want interactivity. You want people to, like, what is the ultimate, the holy grail for content creators? People share your content. So there are very specific metrics. Of course, a great filmmaker wants appreciation, wants it to reach a wider audience, but I don't think that is what they are solely driven by. They are driven by the need to make that film, right? So the two are quite different. So if we, for the purpose, I think, of this session
Perhaps
and
if we
your
look at only
audience,
art,
let's take content and put art aside for
although I would be
another
curious to
time.
know your answer for art first, actually. I think that makes more sense.
There isn't an answer for art. The answer for art is that content is made with a specific audience in mind. It's very engineered.
Right.
I don't think great movies, great books are engineered to that degree. They are much more the outcome of a creative endeavor or a thought process of the filmmaker or the writer. They are not so carefully tailored to what the audience wants.
That's interesting. And do you think then that in this day and age, because now the terms content, art, etc., they're so, fluid, and you might use one for the other, that the lessons, be it positive or negative, of content as you're defining it, might seep its way into art. And when somebody is looking to create, say, art today, they might be making those, I don't want to call them mistakes as such. They're also driven by the same principles of, this book needs to be for a certain kind of audience, rather than just, let me just express whatever is there.
But then they've crossed over the dark side into the content bucket. Now, then I don't think that is art anymore.
Fair enough. Then the question to ask might be, is it possible to create pure art in the 2020s, given...
Don't you see it every day? I mean, you read a great book, you're moved by it, you read... I think there are still enough people who do what they do because they are driven to do it, and that is their life's work. And I don't think that they are... you have perhaps a larger audience that does it very tailored and very engineered. But I think still we have enough wonderful, great filmmakers, writers, artists. I don't think those are going away, thankfully.
All right. And new content formats or new formats lend themselves well to new kinds of art.
100%. So I think that is, the interesting thing about this whole content revolution, as we're calling it, is that it's subsumed formats, right? Because I think that, earlier, before this whole internet wave, you were very driven by the medium. You had filmmakers, writers, painters, watercolor painters. I mean, it was all very much, you were defined by the medium. I think what's happening now is that the medium has become very fluid. Right.
So there are not as many boxes.
There are not as many boxes. Now people are very comfortable crossing over mediums, mixing the two. I mean, you have now with, may I drop the AI word, but you have a whole genre of artists emerging who are using AI, and that doesn't make it any less art.
Right.
So I think that mediums are not, as you said, they're not these tight boxes anymore, which is a good thing.
Yeah, and it's almost like what is more important might be a philosophy rather than the exact format. Like one thing that we tell the cohort members who sign up for our program is that, okay, you might come in saying that you want to start a podcast, and maybe 6 months down the line that you realize that okay, a better manifestation of this idea that you want to put out in the world, ultimately it's about the idea/philosophy, right? Might be better run through a book or a newsletter, or maybe even you just going with placard in Cubbon Park and asking for change to happen. So I think, that's one very interesting thing that has happened. And I suppose also the entry barriers have become a lot less in some sense, right?
There are no entry barriers now other than your own inhibitions, I think, and resilience. Like, I think the one thing to remember is that if you are creating content with a means to an end, then it takes a lot of time. And, a lot of people give up too easily. So I think that there are no barriers today. I mean, if you are okay getting in front of whatever it is, whatever the medium you choose, and sticking it out for a while to see if the thing has legs, then...
Yeah, absolutely. I think it just mirrors so much of the, so much of our own philosophy and belief with respect to content. So, or art. I'm going to be very careful about using these terms now. Let's talk about the hard copy, Meeta. I think, I have seen it from pretty much since inception. And interestingly enough, the place where I'm staying, which is Utsav's guest bed, has a book called... Kawads of Rajasthan or something like that. And there's a small story over there. So, Meeta, I know it, but many people who are watching this will not. So, would love to just hear the story of the hard copy, which pretty much completes, I'm going to say 5-ish years around the time that we are recording. I think it was. Just take us through it and the genesis of it as well. Like, how you thought about it and how it finally manifested, and of course the evolution from there, and we'll take on sub questions from there, I guess.
Sure. Yeah, so I think hard copy started end of 2019, and it was just driven by this, I was quite annoyed at the fact that it was 2019 and India still didn't have anything that talked about design. Everything devoted to the creative industry still focused on the ad film. And I was like, come on. I mean, this is ridiculous. We need to be talking about design. And so I said, I'm going to start this publication. And honestly, it was a very different animal at that point. The idea was to launch subscription, have a newsletter. Newsletters were like really big, coming out as a, alternate content format. And focus on design in India. And so Deepak was part of it. We launched the hard copy, went to every design conference, whichever the couple that there are in the country, talked to designers. And we started publishing January 2020. And the idea was to tell stories of Indian design, whether it was graphic design, digital product design, which is, a big thing. Also, we had a section called Next Billion Stories, which is how is design impacting the world outside the cities, really, like we had great stories of how somebody used a simple QR code on textbooks, which was so much more effective than all these multi-billion-dollar ed techs. So a lot of that. And, then COVID hit, 2020. So in a sense, it was both a good thing and a bad thing. It was a good thing because I had nothing else to do. Everybody had nothing else to do. We were just stuck at home. So we wrote and we wrote and we wrote.
And it gave us so much fodder for content. Like I remember all those pieces about one of the early pieces that I did was how design education itself might
Exactly.
change during COVID and all that. Yeah,
We had a lot of what if stories. What if this continues? What if remote becomes a thing? How are things going to change? So we had a lot to write about. And I think at least it kept me sane, and we had a lot of readers. I mean, it grew exponentially because also people were sitting at home and wanting to consume content, right? And hard copy had a very clear point of view. We did not dumb anything down. A lot of people wrote back and said, come on, in this day and age, you're doing 1,200 word articles. Who is going to read them? And I was like, that's fine. We'll see who wants to read them, but I'm not dumbing this thing down. And we're not carrying press releases and all of that. So we did that, and then the pandemic lifted, and until then we were just writing. I mean, we were just banging out stuff, sitting in our pajamas and, getting lots of interaction, lots of people calling, saying, we love it. We wait for Thursday morning. We send out a newsletter every Thursday morning. So it was great. And I wasn't really looking at the numbers because, you say, leave it for now. It's fine. And then the pandemic lifted and it was really time to get a little more serious about this thing. So we started looking at the numbers and, we realized that we had plateaued. We weren't growing. We weren't getting more readers, more subscribers. And everything we tried, we'd never done any paid marketing, but we even tried running ads. We tried everything. Nothing worked. And then I really don't know who in the team had this idea, but we said, let's look at the email database, right? And we did this exercise where we stripped away all public domain IDs, right? So we created a segment which didn't have any Yahoo, Gmail, whatever IDs. And then we looked at, so there were just company IDs left. And then we realized that we had a very large proportion of first name at companydomain.com. And typically, who is first name at companydomain.com? It's the founding team.
Yeah.
Because that's the first email IDs you set up.
Yeah.
And it was such a revelation for us. I mean, to realize that we had so many founders reading hard copy and founders from really well-known companies. And I was like, why are they reading us?
The content focus at this point of time was still largely oriented towards design.
It was design. It was like, this one did this new brand identity. This one did this new product design. We did this. They did this interface. It was very much very design oriented. And then I think, long story short, what we realized was that designers were very much more interested in the craft, which, really global publications were covering very well. So what font to pick, we weren't catering to that. We were looking more at the business impact of what design did, right? And there was a limited audience for that. We had saturated whoever was a designer and wanted to read a 1,200 word article.
Had discovered hard copy by
Yeah, and had discovered hard copy by then. There was nobody now. Very few people left who didn't. So we said, okay, if founders are interested in hearing about design, but, from this very business lens, and then we went forward and said, then maybe they're interested in the larger space of brand building, but not as a CMO is so interested in it, but again, from a larger sort of, okay, what should I know about building a brand? What should I know about design? What should I know about metrics, right? And so we took that decision, 1.5 years ago to say, okay, this is it. We are going to now change focus. We're going to write for founders who are building brands. And again, it's a loose term. It doesn't mean you have to actually be a founder. You can be we have plenty of designers. We have, marketers. We have, interestingly, so much faculty. We ran a survey just a few months ago saying, what else would you like to see? And we didn't even have faculty in the drop down. So we got a lot of angry mails, saying, why don't you have faculty? I'm professor here. And I was like, okay, so
we exist.
Yeah, they were like quite annoyed. And so that's the learning, right? Every time you reach out and touch your readers, for us, we learn something new. So yeah, that's been the evolution. After that, growth has been exponential. And it shows just in the engagement. We now have founders, big and small, writing in with all kinds of, either feedback or questions or commenting and it's, I think, it took us a while. We were very slow, but we finally found the people who truly appreciate what we are doing.
Yeah, that's amazing. And, it's interesting because very often, and we have written some, I suppose, 8-9 case studies for various brands together. And once in a while, we'll reflect on them and say, and realize that, hey, okay, we're talking about, say, a D2C snack brand over here, or say a UI-led app over here, or whatever. But there are common threads for success for all of them, which we have discussed at many points of time. And one of those always was speak to your customers. Take time out and institutionalize time to speak to your customers, because those are going to give you insights which you probably have never thought about before. And it's kind of full circle, and it's very satisfying that that's kind of happened to the publication that's giving out this advice as well. Since the shift to, say, going from design to, say, I'm going to say more founders or marketers, have there been any surprises? Have there been any interesting things that have come about after this? Like, it could be maybe the kind of questions that are being asked, or the kind of feedback that you've been getting, or people from, say, this kind of city or this kind of industry, anything that would have surprised the Meeta that took the decision to shift from design to founders?
I think that maybe, I don't know if it was a surprise, but it's certainly very gratifying that we're reaching a lot of, like, most of the mails we get, right? Most of the people who reply are founders from small towns, outside the metros. And they write in with some super interesting questions. I mean, there was, a founder who was thinking about launching a plus size brand, because he said that, he sees his sisters and it's just a problem. They're not able to, we're not always able to answer their questions, which I feel really terrible about. But I think that's been really, to know that they are reading hard copy I don't know, it really makes me feel so happy. I can't tell you, because, in the big cities, you have access to a lot of stuff, right? There are meetups, and there's just so much talk. In Bangalore, particularly, if you go to a cafe, there'll be 5 other people discussing, I don't know, product market fit or whatever. But, I don't know if there's that much access to information and community in the much smaller towns. So I think that's been immensely gratifying that they're taking the trouble to read this quite dense stuff, and then writing in with very specific questions, very specific, very intelligent, very thought-provoking questions.
It clearly shows they're really engaged with the content and thought about it, applied it to their situation, and then asked you questions.
And hungry for more, and then I sometimes think, my God, these are people who are fluent in English. Just think how many entrepreneurs there must be out there who are not. And, sometimes I do think, how could we touch their lives? But then I get quite scared, because it's a very big problem to solve, and I don't know if I have the means to do it.
Yeah, all right, fair. What is the process of coming out with said dense content? The newsletter is quite a read, and every time I see it, I'm like, okay, that's a fair bit of work that must have gone behind it.
Let me get my coffee and then sit down. We hear that a lot. Yeah. So, again,
I think you should just give folks who probably haven't seen one, what the general structure of one of the newsletters is.
Yeah. So typically we do one long story in hard copy a week, and that'll be the lead story in the newsletter, where we'll just introduce it and then link out. But the rest of the newsletter is just a roundup of everything that's interesting in brand and design that week. And that is Indian and global. So we just do like quick roundups of anything we found interesting. And it's a very organic, like, how do we decide what to feature? It's very organic. Like, everybody, from readers to the team, everybody sends in things on WhatsApp. It's a highly unorganized system of saying, do you think this is interesting? Do you think this is interesting? And we just pick. We've by now developed, I think, a good feel for what the audience is looking for. And I think that, once we took that decision not to monetize, right? And I realized that I just didn't want to go down that path. And again, that's a whole thing that I'm sure you're talking to your audience at 6% about. But if you decide to monetize, then your trajectory is just so different, right? You have to think about very different things. So now I say, we're not taking money from anybody. So if I find it interesting, it's going into the newsletter. So a bit arbitrary. Yeah.
It's almost like a portrait of your curiosity, right?
Yeah. Like I'm very interested in technology. So it's quite heavily tech oriented, I think. So, I just give myself that privilege.
How long does one newsletter typically take? Everything all told, right? Including lead, article. And I'm sure there are multiple ones that you're working on at various points of time, but I don't know if that's an easy question to answer. Like, how long would a newsletter take to put together?
The newsletter doesn't take more than a day to put together because, like I said, we're not sitting on that day and then saying, what should we put in?
Right.
There's like a WhatsApp repository, which really I wish there was a way to share because it's just the most interesting links and thoughts and ideas in it that have come from everywhere. We just forward it to this one group, then pick what we want to. So the actual putting together of the newsletter is really not more than a day. Of course, the process continues. The long story takes time. That takes a lot of time because, and again, not the writing of it. It's the, it's the process of nailing down somebody senior enough to do the interview. That takes a lot of juggling because we do it from first principles. So we typically like to hear from founders or at least from people who've been involved in building out the brand. That takes time. But the process now, again, we've gotten better, right? So we do maybe an hour and a half interview with the founder, maybe with some of their team. And then one of the writers or me or the team together, I think it takes us about maybe a week to put the story together. It's typically a week to 10 days. So I think we've become very efficient.
Yeah, I think the process would have got ironed out or
it really
say perfected or inching towards perfection over time. As this is interesting for me to be asking you this question because in some sense I have worked with you for this and I have always found the feedback that you've given me extremely sharp, right? It's not the usual correct the grammar here or whatever, but it's like this very specific outcome that I am seeking is not over here or the answer, or I think the thing that you told me the most is this isn't a sharp or differentiated enough insight. Yeah. And it made me think about not just writing for the hard copy in a much better way, but also about marketing and dare I say content itself. How do you arrive at those lens that you look at the outcome of any, I'm going to call it content for now. For hard copy, for instance, do you keep like a end persona in mind and say, okay, is this going to be useful to that person? Could you just walk us through that almost like thinking process when you get a draft from somebody like me who's done an interview and said, okay, these are the 5 takeaways that I think are there. So what's the lens that you look at when you are looking to give feedback?
So I think that, I have to thank my many years of training as a practitioner. And I think what that helps you do is always remove yourself, your personal biases from the process and look at it from the audience's point of view. And, I've done that for years and I've helped brands do that. So it's kind of ingrained in my psyche. And when you are interviewing somebody, and especially since we interview now a lot of founders with very strong, charismatic personalities, you tend to get, the conversations are very exciting, very high energy. You tend to take away a lot of the stuff they're saying. But the lens that we want to apply is one, for the reader, for this reader who's giving hard copy time, is it worth their time? Are they learning something new, or has this, I'm sure that founder has said this to 1,000 different publications. Now, if it's already been covered by massive publications, the hard copy is like tiny. Why are we wasting their time and telling them the same thing again? And secondly, sometimes, like I said, you get carried away with the energy of the founder, but actually that's not, what they're saying is probably something that the reader already knows. So why bother? So, we are very specific. Like, if you can't say something new and interesting and useful, then let's not waste the space.
Have you figured out any techniques to dig deeper and ask, and we are saying this as we are interviewing, but the founders are going to give the same standard 5 answers, or
but it's our job to make them not. That is why we have a readership today. Otherwise, why I can't match the reach of large publications.
Sure.
Like, we're tiny. So if we were saying the same thing, then why are people bothering?
Right, yeah.
And I think it also works from the perspective of the person who is giving the interview, right? So one of the things I learned from a film critic, he was telling us is that if you're going to make Shah Rukh Khan, what are you going to ask him that nobody has asked him before?
So can I give an anecdote? You can edit it out. because it so long ago we were doing the brand Shoppers Stop, and they had a launch party and they invited Shah Rukh Khan, and somebody said this, like, who is going to ask Shah Rukh Khan a question that he's never been asked before? And one guy got up and said, "Why do you have a ponytail?" And it was just it was fantastic. I mean, I really wanted to go and pat him on the back because the audience he was immediately shut down and the mic taken away from him. But
he didn't ask that question. I would have loved to know that answer. No, it always fascinates me, and this is like content waiting to happen, which is, I feel like the people who are interviewed regularly, they are always interviewed for a certain thing. And when they're asked about, say, their interests or something, or just an offbeat question like this, I think it just makes it very interesting for all involved, including the person who is tired of giving the same answer again and again.
And see, we're going at it from a very specific lens. We are asking the founders about how did you build your brand? And we're going to be asking questions that a generalist journalist is never going to ask because they're not practitioners.
Right.
So we are getting into the nitty-gritties. We are saying, how did you do this? How did you do that? Oh, by the way, this brand did this. So it becomes a kind of, and they're very interested and they'll say, oh, tell us more. What did you hear about that? And so it's a very different conversation. And honestly, again, the first lot of founders spoke to us because I knew them personally. And, now why are founders speaking to us? They don't need to. Like, the founder has got the worst schedule of any human being, right? Because they know that it'll be a two-way conversation. It'll be an intelligent story, and it's not going to be the standard questions.
Yeah. And no, I've always been proud of how it's been perceived as a slightly different kind of publication by the people who we are interviewing. I mean, it just lowers that barrier almost sometimes, and I'm sure that it makes the job easier in some sense to get a foot in the door, and from readers as well. Like, they say, okay, like the hard copy has a different take on this. The one thing that I have always I've noticed and has been consistent is that you are not afraid to put your voice in there, right? Your personal opinions or whatever. It's not an anodyne publication, let me put it that way, in terms of tone, right? There's a certain sharpness that it has, a certain grittiness that you have. Your personal views often do come out in the publication in many ways, and of course on the content we put out on social as well. Is that conscious? Did you at any point of time think, okay, should I strip the Meeta down and amp the hard copy part of it up?
So I did think about it because I really don't want to do it. Why? Because if you're going to sort of give that personality angle to it, then, you have to be very good at social media. I don't know. Hopeless. It's just like zero.
Yeah, please join our club.
Zero. Like, you have to put a gun to my head and make me post on LinkedIn. But so, it's a big disadvantage. Yeah. I mean, when we look at our analytics, like social media is zero. So
all organics.
Yeah, all organic. It hurts when you know what you should be doing and you're not doing it. So I did try for a while to, have my personality in the background, and so that I don't have to get involved. But it's very difficult to do. It depends again on what you're trying to build, right? If I don't have that personal point of view, I don't think that many people will read hard copy, especially today, because it's very easy now to generate lots of generic anonymous information. right? So people more and more are going to be they already are. They follow voices. So it was a hard choice, and I'm just walking that tightrope where hard copy has my personality, but I'm still hopeless on social media. So as long as it continues.
No, that's fair. And actually, it's interesting that you had mentioned that. Is a nice point, I think, to segue to the technology du jour, as it was. I mean, it's become easier than ever before to generate content that I call the sort of like the middling middle, right? It's easier than ever to crank out stuff that is, say, a 6 out of 10. It's never been easier to go from 0 to getting a B, for example, in assignment, because you just need to feed the question as a prompt. So the question that I kind of have is then, is it really, and I think this is really for advice to potential creators or artists, which is throughout history, and if you look at this evolution of art, evolution has always progress has always happened from outliers who think slightly differently on the fringes, who might be perceived wacky at one point of time, but eventually their means get adopted by the mainstream. I mean, you can take this with anything, starting from the Beatles and their experiments in the studio, all the way to say certain graphic design artists, to even stuff that's happening today. So this evolution at the fringes, I mean, I don't really have a sharp question over here as such. It's just something that I thought about as you were saying those, which is, in a world where creating the middling middle is easier than ever before, it is more important to find that little bit of, say, a character quirk or a format quirk or something like that, which might look like it doesn't have too much of an audience at first, but as many wise people have said, it's better to be loved by a few rather than liked by many. So just wanted your, take on that. Again, I don't have a really sharp question over there. It's really more a observation from what you had just said, and generative AI, etc. is something that I did want to eventually segue to. So this is as good a point as I need to do that, I guess.
Yeah. So I think that in history, I mean, if you look at it, every time there is a new technology, every time there is this new wave of, things which make it easier to produce whatever, from physical goods to content, a large portion of the population will start mass producing things, right? From the Industrial Revolution onwards. But the human spirit and, human creative endeavor always ultimately rises above. So, handcrafted, more valuable than machine made. I still think even with generative AI, it's going to, two things are going to happen. One is that you're going to have, like you said, just a sea of mediocre content. Like, it's going to be horrible. It is already horrible. But that's going to happen. But I also think what's going to happen is that you're going to have genuinely talented people who earlier just didn't have the option of being able to have their voice heard, right? For example, easy translation services now, or easy video editing, or text to video, or whatever are those things coming out. If they have a genuine point of view and really something valuable to say, they now have an arsenal of tools which they didn't have before.
Right.
So I think that you're also going to see some exceptional stuff coming out.
Right.
And to me, I think that the intensity of this wave and the impact that it's going to have, the AI wave, is going to be unprecedented. But I think in terms of final consequences and impact, pretty much that's what it'll be. That human spirit will rise above and be valued. But you will have like a huge mass of AI-generated content. We're going to have to wade through that.
Yeah, absolutely. Interesting. Just today morning, I went for a walk around a lake near Utsav's place, and I was just looking at the reviews of that, and the reviews are AI generated now. I mean, you can just see the standard.
Yeah.
Like if the word symphony is there and it acts as a testament to old Bangalore and all that. I mean,
what's going to happen to that? You're going to then, I don't know, but I would say that what's going to happen is that human reviews are going to start getting very valuable.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And there's going to be some smart person who is going to figure out how to classify or how to indicate that this is a human review, and they are going to make a lot of money.
I would even like to, I would even go to the extent of saying that, and like, the average person on the street and who doesn't say cover technology and marketing for a living will be able to tell something that is AI generated versus, I mean, at least at a very broad level, at a very lazy level, somebody who's just writing, give me a review of X lake in Bangalore, that generic output that you're going to get without too much thought being put into the prompt by itself. I would like to think that many people will be able to sniff that lazy prompt output out.
Like if you think about today versus 5 years ago, I think, today most people will say, if they see something on their phones which says click this link or you are getting 50,000 rupees or something, they'll say ye to scam hai. It's become part of the.
That's right. Yeah.
So that's what I'm saying. I think finally we managed to get our heads around things. It takes a little bit of time, a little bit of pain, but
the reactions we get on family WhatsApp groups are a nice indicator of how people are reacting to technology and all that in general, I suppose.
I really actually resonate with the point of the human spirit rising, because even with the industrial revolution came in, right? The fact that the most premium and luxury brands today talk about handcrafting, is that for that reason, right? To say that there has been attention, there has been an input, and there's been some sort of a perseverance or a passion to create what has gone into it.
Absolutely.
And that's what people have started valuing. So at some point, people will go out and seek, hey, is this book being written with AI? Yeah. Or, is this podcast, has this conversation be generated with, an AI tool and there's no really guest sitting in front of us?
Yeah.
So I think that's just going to play out even more. And I think what AI has done is that if industrial was at X, probably AI is at X to the power X. And the valuation of handcrafted stuff or stuff done by humans is going to even be further than what we saw in the industrial revolution.
I think so. I think it's going to be harder, but harder in what context? There was a lot of pain even with the industrial revolution, right? So I think that we are going to see that. We are in the middle of waves after wave of layoffs. I don't think that's going to stop. We're seeing that it's becoming like so much easier to create content now that a lot of people are going to get disrupted. But at the end of it, are we going to become just this world which has only AI generated stuff? No.
Yeah, absolutely. I would like to think that two big skills over the next decade, especially for people who are just, say, graduating from, say, a school or university in that time, is going to be the ability to give a machine a high quality input and the ability to treat or judge the output of a machine. So today we may call it, say, prompt engineering, or write a nicer prompt and then take the output of what GPT gives you or Midjourney gives you and build on top of that. But I do believe that these two things are going to evolve to a level where you're going to have very specialist kind of functions. Like, I would be surprised if, say, Sotheby's doesn't have somebody who is a expert at weeding out whether a piece of art that has been submitted to them is AI generated or not. Just like I'm sure maybe 50 years ago they had somebody to evaluate whether a Picasso is an actual Picasso or not. So
I think people, the highest skill sets are going, the skill sets that are going to be very valued are people who have learned to harness the power that AI gives them.
Yeah.
I think that is something that everyone should be thinking.
Yeah, as our hero Scott Galloway is fond of saying, it's not AI that's going to take away a job, but somebody who understands AI that's going to take away a job. That's, it's very interesting, and it kind of it takes me back to the first discussion that we were having, which is the whole content versus art kind of thing, and the whole creator economy sort of space that we are going through right now. Utsav and I have both got into it out of just love, passion, or just let's see what this new format is, rather than harboring any dreams of fame, fortune, riches, reach, whatever the case.
Maybe anyways not come. So
anyway not come. Fair enough.
It's early days.
Yeah. So it's early, and it almost feels like many people are kind of seeing content as, again, to use the term that you said, a means to an end rather than an end in itself, right? So it makes me hopeful of two things. One is that a lot of the folks who are in it for the end rather than the journey by itself are going to drop out because they realize, hey, if I want fame or riches, there are easier ways of.
Why? Maybe you'll find a Mr. Beast in your 6% club.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, who knows?
No, but that's the thing, right? I don't think fair enough. If you look at that example, he himself had to go through a lot of things before he actually managed to. In fact, one of the exercises that we love making folks do is actually saying, take any creator who you think is actually like at the top of their game or whatever, and look at their videos in reverse order. And doing that for Mr. Beast is particularly fascinating because his first 3 years of content was absolute crap. But at the same time, you also start noticing those inflection points where he tried some things, and it's actually fascinating to kind of follow the journey. So even if we use Mr. Beast as an example, who has that ability to kind of stick it out for that long? Another very recent one that I came across was MKBHD himself, and he did a video recently where he reviewed old MKBHD videos.
Nice.
And there was a particular point, and a commenter actually brought this out. He says, boss, there was a point of time where you had 100 videos and 74 subscribers, and you still went on doing this.
Yeah.
Right? And sure, we hope that the next Mr. Beast or MKBHD is part of some cohort. But I think, again, we always say there are two very important mantras, right? One is getting started and two is continuing. That's pretty much all you kind of need. So to go back to that point that I was making, a lot of folks who are in it for the quick riches or fame might realize that, I have to create 100 videos even before I have a shot at that fame. No, I'm better off doing something. I'm better off like.
There are no riches or fame in content production. You really have to get lucky.
Yeah, so that's what, right? But again, for the luck to come also, you need to put in that grind almost,
you need
right?
to shoot 100 shots towards the goal for one of them to hit. If you shoot 10, you're not going to hit anything anyways.
And I think many people assume that there's a way to shortcut this because somebody's reached TikTok fame and all that. But again, there are lots of anecdotes and studies to show that TikTok fame is one, extremely short-lived, and two, possibly detrimental. There are examples of, for example, musicians who have gone viral on TikTok for 1 30-second clip of this, and they go on concert tours, and nobody knows anything else apart from that 30 seconds. And there are musicians who are like devastated that, they haven't heard anything else that I've put out and come only for that. And I can imagine that can be pretty psychologically damaging for somebody who's ridden that wave of, making it to the top of TikTok and all that. So I am, in a way, hopeful that because of the entire grind of this process, it will lead to kind of like a bit of, is it too cruel to say Darwinism kind of happening, that folks who don't have the stomach or the passion for sticking it out to get to a point where that inflection point might happen. Sure, some of it might be engineered and you can criticize Mr. Beast's methods or whatever the case may be, but I would like to think that anyone who's actually made it has put in the effort to get there. Sure, there will be luck along the way, but you kind of put yourself in a position where that luck happens. Again, this is not a question as such. I think it's just a very broad observation that I'm thinking, where this whole creator economy, which again, I say used to be a thing, but the whole putting cart before horse situation where, if I just create some reels, I will become famous or my brand will become famous, right? That seems like, to me, I am hopeful that will stop, mostly because everybody's going to realize, hey, creating content by itself is not a very easy kind of task. I just like your reaction on that. It's not a question, really.
Yeah, no, I think all of those things are true. So, if I was to just divide up that thought on the creator economy, I think we're going to be seeing a lot more, right? I think we're going to be seeing a lot more, which is a good thing, because in a way it has led to, the democracy, a democracy of sorts, where now anybody who has a point of view and the stomach to stick out the journey can get up there and have their point of view known. And I think it's super valuable, not just in terms of marketing or in terms of just, for democracies around the world to have, independent platforms with the way media is going. So many things, so many things. So I think that the creator economy is a good thing. I think that with tools that make it easier to create and distribute content, is just going to get bigger. For a person who wants to be a creator, I think that you have to really ask yourself, what are you creating content? Like why are you doing this? Like if your soul, if the answer is I want to do it because I want to be rich and famous, then you're kind of like, I think it's just going to be very hard. If you think you're doing it, if you have an answer where you say, I think by doing this, I could really help X, Y, and Z because they have this need that's not being fulfilled so far and I can fulfill it, then you have a shot.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, you're creating content in the service of something. And I would say before you set out to create, your first 100 reels, just spend some time thinking about in the service of what?
The clarity of ambition.
The clarity of ambition, again, so things that we speak about. Another thing that we espouse anyway is just, it's interesting that these terms, content and all that, are just things that have been part of a vocabulary for the last 5 years. And, any piece of art or something that you put down has suddenly annotations of content and you're suddenly now a content creator. Whereas when we were growing up, we would just doodle at the back of our notebooks and that would, or just sketch blindly without, having
that's art
any.
to me because exactly, there's no, you're not doing it to get shares.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, we always espouse the creation for creation's sake, or just to go a level above that, purely just because it's personally extremely therapeutic to create something and put it out there, or not. Maybe you just want to have some sketches and put it in a book for yourself, and maybe that just makes you feel very happy, and that has positive ramifications for the rest of your day. So just want to ask you about that, Meeta. Is that something that you thought about? Is that something that you do? Is there, for example, some pieces of content/art that you have which the rest of the world may never see, for example, but might just be extremely therapeutic for you to just get it out of your system? And
so I mean, I don't journal or keep a diary or whatever, but I certainly have like a running document on my phone and which has just got lots of thoughts in it.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, it's not art by any standards, but when I go back and read it after a gap, I'm always surprised by myself, and that's a lovely feeling, and that's enough for me. I go back and, sometimes you're not current with yourself, and I go back and I think, oh, but 2 years ago I was thinking of this. So, that's enough gratification for me.
That's very interesting.
Yeah, actually, I often feel the same thing, because when I'm reading, I often make notes or just jot down things. And sometimes I reread the book, and then I'm transported to a 3-year-old version or version 3 years ago.
Yeah,
I'm like, oh, I was thinking this then.
Yes.
Oh, interesting thought. Oh, I have actually taken this thought to this now.
Exactly.
And I think that realization
self-discovery
is very joyful.
Yeah. And this same thing happened to me a while back when I was putting so a couple of years back I had started my own digital marketing course. I was running it, obviously. You knew that, and he was a student of it as well. Interestingly, and somehow, and this is when you do so much random writing that you forget what you have actually done. I did not realize this, but I had actually published an article for Business Line or one of the publications, and it had the title "How to Make Your Content More Thumb-Stopping." Like, when did I write this? And
did you cringe?
I was, I was fully expecting to cringe, but what was amazing for me was, oh, this is the same principles, but now with better words that I'm putting today. So it was a clickbaity heading, but it was very gratifying. Again, the same words that you said, it was extremely gratifying to realize that, oh, the thought process is kind of like the same when you think from, again, first principles and you stick to those. Sure, the words might get fancier, the examples might become more current, but it's again goes back to what.
And it's something I recommend highly today, because we have become so tuned to our brains are now so wired for that dopamine rush.
Right.
There's nothing we can do about it, right? It's just something we have to learn to live with. That we are so focused on the external.
Right.
We're always waiting to see what is the external reaction, because all around us now there are ways to instantly receive and measure those external reactions.
Right.
So in this scenario, conversations with yourself are extremely important.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
I highly recommend it, whatever the mechanism may be. I mean, writing doesn't have to work for everyone. It can be anything. But really learn to talk to yourself and hear what that voice is saying.
Yeah, hear what that voice is saying, and it's in this hyper productive age, you almost feel like there needs to be
I'm not hyper-productive at all.
Fair enough. No, no, it's almost like there needs to be something that you're doing, consuming at every point of time, like a podcast or like,
No, you're much younger. You speak for yourself. I can happily do nothing for hours.
Yeah, no, and no, would highly, and I mean, at least I am definitely realizing the benefit of that. Somebody who I interviewed recently, cricket journalist, he was talking about how today's generation has lost the ability to feel bored, and he speaks about how much of his current success was because when he was growing up as a young kid who just discovered cricket, would not have access to all the information that is there right now, but would look at the same 5 scorecards, memorize them, and just draw dots, connect these things, and that made him draw his own theories on cricket and what makes for a good bowler, etc., etc. Or this batsman seems to be getting out in this fashion in 5 different ways, and it's an original insight or thing that he came up with himself, and it's like that self moment of discovery, realization is something that I think it's quite interesting when that happens. And you're right, absolutely. Like I think that is one piece of advice that I will definitely take away. Just give yourself a little more time to, I suppose, be bored or just do nothing for
do nothing
for some time. You don't need to be listening to a podcast at every point.
And that's where I keep talking to you about slowing down on things, right? It's just so important to slow down, because if you're just hitting one task / milestone after the other, you have no time to think what has happened in the process of achieving that. And when you don't do that, not only reduces space for self-reflection, it also reduces space for growth. Because your growth is only hitting tasks. Your growth is on understanding who you are and what your process is. And that's why slowing down in every aspect of life, as much as you can and you possibly have the privilege of, is important. And that's why I talk about slow travel so much in my podcast as well.
Yeah, and I think that, also we're just surrounded by these instructions that from all these gurus who are, I'm sure, well-meaning, but get up at this time, do this at this time, don't have caffeine, have caffeine, sleep, don't sleep, I don't know, whatever. Get sunlight, don't get sunlight. It's
wine
just
is
like
good
a
for
lot.
you, wine is bad for you. Like this.
I mean, just so I really wish somebody, and maybe that's a project for you guys, would really look at the daily routines of great men. And when I say great, I mean, who history has judged great after many centuries, not current greats.
Test of time.
They stood the test of time. I'm pretty sure their routines would be all over the place.
All over the place, yeah.
I'm pretty sure they slept till noon and, whatever. I don't think they were we're so structured, because so many people are telling us this is right, this is not right. Now you've got to have this, you got to look like this, I don't think greatness comes out of that.
In fact, there was actually an analysis done on this.
Oh, good.
Someone has already done it. I will look it up and send it to you.
Please do.
And most of the times, they had maybe 10 to 20% of the time which was focused on work, and the rest was completely open. They were so people are going for walks. They don't know, they might go for half an hour walk, they might go for 2 hour walk.
Yeah.
If they felt interested, they will just sit there and be there. Right? And we are doing the exact opposite.
Yeah.
Correct. And then if you are expecting that we'll create great content work, how is it going to happen, right? There's just no space for you to do that work.
Yeah. Before we started cohort 1, Utsav sent me Cal Newport's Slow Productivity, and the entire book is basically full of examples of exactly what you said, which is great men / women over time who have created pieces of work that have stood the test of time, ranging from Jane Austen all the way to a famous New Yorker long form writer to Isaac Newton, and absolutely everything is just completely all over the place in terms of how they structure their day. Or there is no structure to Any of them?
One process I do follow with the hard copy newsletter, and which might be useful for, so sort of the opposite of not being structured, is that I always sleep on it. And this is again some advice that I can't stress enough. Like really for any creative content, anything you're creating, I never write it when I have to send it out.
Right.
Immediately, So we actually have a process where we've built in this quite extensive time to revisit drafts. So after it's put into the, the HTML format, I've kept 2 days to just relook at it again. And the person who codes it is now just used to, he's got a running document called newsletter changes. He just knows it's coming. And it would be so much more efficient for me to do it at that time when I was, doing it. But I can't. I need to see it after a couple of days when it's like nearly baked and just needs the icing. And then I'll tweak things around and I can see later when it goes out to all our readers and I read it. And I realized that those little tweaks actually just made a huge difference. So we'll just stay with this more inefficient process.
Fair enough. I think, we have covered so much ground in just about an hour, I think.
Yeah.
One last question, at least from my side, and it has nothing to do with, process or hard copy or anything, but kind of like where you started from, which is you were frustrated that nobody was really talking about Indian design. I think both of us are big fans of the diversity that this country has to offer in terms of, absolutely everything from cuisine to landscape to culture to, let's call it, content/art. And do you feel like there are, say, certain niches or certain kinds of art formats or things like that India is just ripe to give the rest of the world? Like, of course, we have been riding on the Bollywood and, say, chicken tikka masala wave for a while now. But there are small things that are that are doing the rounds. Like 2 examples that I can think of recently is this is whole wave of I want to call it farmcore, where you have a very therapeutic 30-minute videos of people farming or cooking in a very slow fashion, and that's found an international audience. That's one. And number 2 is an example that I've shared with you many times, is a metal band called Bloodywood from Delhi, which merges Punjabi music and heavy metal, and they've become an absolute phenomenon in the Western world. Playing some of the biggest festivals around the world. And it seems to me like, okay, these two are never going to be huge by themselves, but it's so interesting that these 2 niches these guys have found, maybe organically, maybe accidentally, but it just feels like this can't be the only 2 examples. There might be some that are evading me, but it just feels like this country is ripe for giving out content to the rest of the world, especially when we are living through what I like to think is a golden age of content crossing borders. Like we are seeing the K-drama wave in India and around the world. Some of Netflix's biggest shows like Dark, for example, from Germany, or Money Heist from Spain, is basically content from all around the world really coming out, and in all kinds of formats. So any thoughts on that? Like,
I think instead of sort of picking specific examples, what I would do is step back a little bit and say, what is one of the characteristics of this content age, if we call it, and it is that vertical communities, specific communities have become very large, right? Whereas earlier, when we talked about niches earlier, the word meant small.
Small.
That's no longer true. A niche community today can be very, very large, right? And enough to serve its own content creators, its own little content creator economy. And I think that the minute you have the emergence of that, then wherever those communities overlap with something that India does well, India has a space to create content. So I don't even want to look at it from that very traditional lens of saying, oh, we can do yoga content or we can do spirituality content. I'm saying no, wherever there is, there's so many niche communities being created, and wherever Indian content creators can serve those niche communities, we will see a rise. Because I think that, the one thing that held us back, I'm going back to the early days, was that we just didn't have access to the resources, the tools, the distribution mechanisms, right? All that has changed. We were always fabulous filmmakers, as good, better than anyone else in the world. We're just getting better. So now those barriers are gone. And I think we just have to see which communities we can serve.
Yeah, absolutely. You never know what India might be the next epicenter of. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I mean, we knew that this would be a wide-ranging conversation. I mean, so many like content, art, hard copy, like marketers, content marketing, all that. We've covered a fair bit of ground. So thank you so much, Meeta, for taking the time out. This entire content project, let's call it that, is just I'd like to think an education for us, really, like for us to, I mean, the genesis for this really was for us to improve our own understanding of what the C word really means. And it is, I'd like to think that it's being sharpened one chat.
No, I think it's great what you guys are doing, because I think the one thing we haven't talked about, and so this is a good ending to this episode, is the fact that when you're doing this, it's lonely. You know?
Oh, yeah.
It's it's lonely.
Yeah,
you know,
it is.
And it's so I think that what you're doing is addressing that problem. I mean, if you can create together and you can really find people who you trust enough to work with, look at your content, help you when you're having a day when just nothing goes right. That is so amazing, because all of us are going to have those days when you just like question and can't get two words together and it can get lonely, it can get frustrating. So all the very best for the 6% Club.
Thank you
so much, Meeta.